Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our KuppingerCole Webinar, Controlling Access through Centralized Authorization, moving beyond authentication and administration to protect your data and applications. This webinar is supported by NextLabs and SAP. The speakers today are me, Martin Kuppinger. I'm the principal analyst at KuppingerCole. Then Ken Lim, who is the CEO at NextLabs, and Chris Redkowski, Director of Solution Management at SAP. So before we start with our webinar, I want to quickly go through some housekeeping and some additional information, and then we directly will move into our presentation, our topics. So KuppingerCole, we are an analyst company providing enterprise IT research, advisory, decision support, and networking for IT professionals through our research services, our advisory services, and our events. Amongst our events, there's the European Identity and Cloud Conference, which will be held next time, May 10th to 13th in Munich. It's the number 10, so it's a sort of a jubilee for us. Hope to see you there. It's definitely a very interesting conference and the number one conference on these topics in Europe. Some guidelines for the webinar. You are muted centrally, so you don't have to mute or unmute yourself. We are controlling these features. We will record the webinar, and the podcast recording will be available by tomorrow. And then there will be a Q&A session at the end, so you can enter questions at any time using the questions features in the GoToWebinar control panel. Ideally, once you have a question, just enter it so that we have a good list of questions available when we start the Q&A session. That directly leads me to the agenda for today. As usual, it's split into 3 parts. In fact, it's more 4 parts today because part 2 is with 2 different speakers. So in the first part, I will talk roughly 15 minutes about different ways of handling the access of users from a business point of view and how they are optimally converging into an adaptive policy-based access management, including the authorization services. The second part then, we'll start with Chris Redkowski of SAP, who will talk about reasons why securing business apps is so important, give some insight into use cases, and talk a little bit about why SAP partners with NextLabs and Dynamic Authorization Management, or APAM. And the following part then, Ken Lim of NextLabs will talk about how companies are approaching data protection and how to avoid potential shortcomings and pitfalls. And as I've said, so the second part will take approximately 20-25 minutes. So after 40 plus minutes, we will then move to the Q&A session. And happy to see a lot of questions from your end so that we have a very interesting discussion then. Okay, so let's directly start. And as the topic indicates, the challenge we are talking about is handling access from users from a business point of view. And I think this is a very fundamental thing. It sounds very easy, a standard sentence, but basically, you know, what is the challenge in IT? In IT, we very frequently handle access from users from an IT point of view. Not necessarily because IT likes to do it that way, but because IT doesn't have the business view of it. So this is one of the challenges we're clearly facing. And so when we talk about handling access from users from a business point of view, we're talking about various requirements we have to support. So one is flexibility. The access given needs to be flexible enough to support changing business requirements. And there's clearly the area of security and compliance. So how can we support the access of these users in a way that we fulfill the security requirements, that we remain compliant or become compliant? Another area is business context. So when we talk about handling access from users or users from a business point of view, it's very much about how can we also support the business context. There might be situations, for instance, where some users are so more or less have the same job title, but are allowed to do different things. One is allowed to sell in that region of, and another is allowed to sell in another region, or some are only allowed to see the data of certain banking customers, while others might allow to see the data of, in quotas, their customers. And there's the user context, which is another increasingly important element. So when we talk about access, it's also not only about saying, okay, who's allowed to see which information and handle which information in which way. It's also about the other side of the equation, which is in which cases do we want to allow a user to do what? And with an increasing level of mobility, an increasing level of bring your own device and other factors, we need to understand what's the context someone is working with a tool. And we might not allow everything the same way in every situation. And then when we look at this business context, which is one part of the entire thing, then we have a number of elements in this business context. And one of these elements is the organizational unit, very clearly. So the business context, one part always is to which organization does someone belong? What is his job? So the job description, or sort of the elements within that. It might also go into a business process view, so which tasks and business processes does someone have to do. We have a very important element, which are competencies. I already scratched this just before. So someone might be allowed to approve bills up to 100,000. Others might be allowed to approve bills beyond 100,000. This is a competency, so which sort of is orthogonal to the standard role or job description. We have projects and we have a lot of other things, as I've mentioned. So the entire who's allowed or who's working on which tasks in which business processes, this is another aspect. And this business context obviously is a relatively complex thing to understand. And when we want to manage the access of users correctly, we need to understand this business context. There are various ways to do it, and a very traditional way is what is commonly called ABAC, so for role-based access control. I don't want to go into every detail of this graphic here, but basically ABAC is about saying I have roles, so I try to describe my environment by using roles. So someone has a role, a business role, there are functional roles, there are constraints or competencies, and all this together then leads to certain actions on information objects based on entitlements someone can perform. So roles are abstractions. The challenge is that it's not that easy on one hand, not that easy to build a working role model. It requires a lot of work, a lot of thinking, and a lot of organizational maturity at the end of the day. And the other thing is these models are relatively static, basically. So dynamic changes of business policies, of business processes, all that stuff is not that easy to implement if you have a role-based model. On the other hand, many IT systems are more or less constructed for dealing with such role-based models. So they have, on their end, they have sort of static constructs such as roles at their system level or groups or whatever, which can work well with these role-based models. On the other hand, we have something which is commonly called ABAC, for attribute-based access control. I personally tend to use a term which I call APAM, for adaptive policy-based access management. Why I tend to use that term, that's something I will explain later on during that presentation. So this relies then on a flexible set of attributes, and authorization decisions are based on policies made at runtime. I tried to quickly explain the basic concept. So we have an area where we administer policies, so where we define the policies, where we manage the policies. They are stored somewhere in a policy repository point. A lot of whatever P's herein, but that's how it was named by someone. Then we have the policy decision point, and this is where effectively the decisions about what is allowed or not are made, which requests information, for instance, from databases, directories, or services, for instance, context, to be used in these decisions. And then we have policy enforcement points, and these policy enforcement points are sort of the link to the applications and services. So policy enforcement points then, in fact, enforce a policy within an application or a service, and in fact, enforce the authorization decision here. So these might be central to the policy decision point, and application services remotely. They might be the PEP's policy enforcement points might be remotely directly attached to the application services. There might be an application server in between which has a central PEP. There might be a gateway. There are various ways to implement this, to construct this, and there are different use cases which led to this sort of increased flexibility around this model. So this is basically the model, and what we have then are policies which are based on attributes. We receive these attributes of the identity from various systems potentially, and we might receive additional attributes which are provided by the application at runtime, so that we can make a decision based on attributes and the policy, which for instance says when Martin Kuppinger is member of the group finance or the finance department, to take the OU, then he's allowed to use the printer in the finance department. That would be a policy with some attributes, and the attributes is, for instance, the OU. Clearly, this can be far more complex, but basically, this is the underlying concept. So we have seen a lot of discussion around RBAC versus ABAC. I don't think that it's a discussion of the one or the other. It's more a continuum, because you rarely have RBAC-only concepts, and you rarely have the perfect ABAC concept. So when we look at RBAC, commonly, so the role-based concepts not only have roles, but they have some sort of constraints to build more roles. They might map in the organizational structure. Then when we move to business activities, we still can be more in a role concept, which is based on that. The context still is something which is far more dynamic, which goes more to the attributes which are used at runtime. The risk equation then is something which can be factored in these policies, and other attributes. So it's more a continuum we are observing here. And so between purely RBAC and the perfect attribute-based access control solutions, you might be more to the left or more to the right, or have something which just is built more on the RBAC side for applications which don't support policy-based access management, while you have other things which are more on the other end of the this arrow. But so it's not that the one is good and the other is bad, or the one is it's not a conflict between. It's more when to apply what as a question. And I just want to quickly look at what really, from our perspective, makes the difference. And what really makes the difference is ABAC is policy-based. RBAC might use policies and then abstract them into roles. So it's more a translation of what you have. While in ABAC, you just say this is the policy, this is enforced, which has the advantage in ABAC that policy changes are enforced immediately, while they in RBAC needs to be reflected in roles and pushed again to target systems. It's always slower, sometimes pretty complex. Intrusiveness to the target system in RBAC none too little, because you just translate roles into system-level types of entitlements, such as SAP business roles, which then would be this, the system-level entitlement, or global groups and Active Directory or whatever. And ABAC, unless the application supports one of the standards, you need to find some way of integration. There are various types of doing that. I won't go into detail here because we have somewhat limited time, but Chris and Kang later on will talk about how such a system can interface to SAP and how this is constructed. So this is an example where you have done a combination of sort of ABAC-ready environments. The ability to cover constraints clearly is higher in ABAC because it's just another attribute, while in the other case in RBAC you have more and more roles. Authorization decisions are far more dynamic in the ABAC environment, where you really do a central decision, even while the PEP might be distributed, and it's always based on the current state of the policy and the current state of the attributes. So ABAC, in fact, is more dynamic. It's also why we talked a lot about dynamic authorization management. Changes in policies are enforced dynamically instead of transferring them into static entitlements. So when we really want to become better in what we're doing, then we should look at the very traditional 4 A's of our identity and access management, which are administration, authentication, authorization, and auditing. And the authorization part is one of the most challenging here. There are other parts of application security infrastructures, so of infrastructures where applications rely on a standard set of security services. So applications are built and they don't know anything about security. They just call other services, or they don't implement their own security service. They clearly need to call out so they know something. And this is the application security infrastructure with services for administration, where standards like LDAP are in, authentication, SAML OAuth, authorization services. For auditing, we have a little bit of lack of a standard. Other security services I've left aside a little. Yeah, and the authorization area, for instance, XACML and OpenAC are standards. And so we can construct an authorization service which provides this. And the advantage is that we have a standard service for a lot of applications. This is sort of the ideal world where we don't code security into applications, but where we just rely on a standard set of services. Still, for many organizations, a long way to go, but something we should look at. And when we talk about this authorization, then we automatically talk about context and policy. So the context part is decisions will differ depending on the context, the device, the network, the risk, the health state, whatever. And policies must enable context-based decisions today, so that we can say, depending on the context, the decision might look different. On the other hand, we have the policies, which is the main element, which is a standardized approach for transforming business requirements to IT. And here we are back to this core topic of this webinar. How can we manage access from a business point of view? By using policies which are defined in a business notation or in a business understandable notation, and then transformed, ideally automatically, in what the systems do. Business policies are well understood by business, so it's not a transformation into IT language which is required, at least as long as the user interface is good enough. And we have a uniform way to define policies then at various levels, so we can have high-level business policies which have the same structure and language and quotas as the technical IT policies. So whether we decide about what is the limit for an approval, or whether we decide on who is allowed to access which printer, it's the same policy construct. So the content of the policy changes, but the way they look like don't change. So what to do to make this a reality? So we tend to talk about APAM today due to this adaptiveness and the policy-based approach to access management. Get rid of silos. So one of the biggest challenges currently is that application developers and the information security people don't talk enough with each other. Here we're talking about how can applications or specific application environments, for instance SAP, work together with such a control system. That means we have to talk beyond the boundaries between these areas. We need clear guidelines for future application architecture development procurement at the higher level. It's easier if you focus on a solution for a particular environment, such as NextLabs and SAP. We make it simple to use, so for developers and for the business to define it in a simple language. We need to build the infrastructure, and we need to support transition if you look at it at large scale. So this makes it hard to say we do everything based on these concepts, because a lot of applications won't support it. It's definitely a way to go. It's a journey. It's not a simple thing to do. But on the other hand, that's what Chris and Kang will talk about right now, there are areas where you can greatly improve your access management from a business point of view by using solutions which are ready for certain areas, for certain use cases. So this is where I want to hand over right now to Chris first, who will talk about the reasons, again, why it's so important and give some insight from the SAP perspective. And after Chris, I will hand over to Kang for the next part of the presentation. So Chris, it's your turn.
Thanks so very much for the introduction. As a matter of fact, as you were going through your slides, it triggered a couple of thoughts that I'd like to share with everyone. So one of the things that we've seen at SAP in the last year is a significant change in the threat landscape. There have been, well, several articles published. Business applications have become the subject of at a couple major security conferences, and the very intention of these business applications in terms of connectivity and flexibility also introduces a number of potential security vulnerabilities and issues. So we've seen that change significantly increase over the last year, and in many organizations, these business applications are essentially running a significant portion of the business, to the extent that, if they go down for whatever reason, you're unable to continue manufacturing or producing. The automation that these systems provide is enormous, and it seems shocking, but for a large organization to have to resort to handwriting checks for payroll is pretty shocking for a lot of people. So if SAP systems go down, the impact can be enormous. Not only inability to conduct business and loss of data, but of course there are potentials for brand and reputation loss. So I think the security by obscurity, security by complexity is really no longer applicable, even for complex business applications. And these are increasingly becoming the target of attacks. So one of the challenges that we're also seeing is that the fundamental model that enabled SAP and other applications to sort of live behind the protected firewall are changing. These systems are becoming more interconnected and are exposing more data in a variety of different ways that were really never envisioned as the applications were originally designed. So more data is being exposed through customer and partner channels. Large organizations who are managing their supply chains expose interfaces to SAP so that partners can check inventory, so that they can automatically go out and build more, more raw materials. There's mobility and new applications that call into interfaces in SAP. And this essentially makes the business application more exposed. One interesting thing that we're seeing amongst our customers is that security in general, is a challenge. And however, for business reasons, you want to make security as transparent as possible. The more hurdles you put in the way, the fewer users will come and use your application. And this is becoming more and more relevant as we go to the cloud. So for any consumer application, if any kind of action that you require of your users, whether it's resetting their password or even fundamental to authentication, entering their username and password, all these different things represent a revenue opportunity or loss. If you are a consumer, application, you're trying to convert, free members to paying members. If you ask them to register or you force upon them complex password policies, these kinds of things have been studied, and there are direct revenue impacts with that. So, as we move towards a model that's based on sort of user centricity, which is essentially making the security transparent, we want to make it as easy as possible for users to access the applications, however, still have the same security in place. So a lot of the things that Martin is talking about, it has to do with making the security flexible and transparent to the end user. Policy-based security is essentially one framework which adds an additional layer that can make that happen. And so today, most applications all rely on authentication, and within an SAP system, you can create an account, but if they don't have any roles assigned, the user won't be able to perform any actions. So the authorization is very important, and what they're granted is extremely important. And the policy-based model provides another set of security and flexibility that enables the access and data that users can get to more seamless and a lot easier. So a lot of what we're talking about today has to do with the fact that most security is based on a combination of authentication or verifying who a user is. Applications have typically performed the logic and the authorization aspect of a user. And the framework that we're talking about today allows applications to consider external information or data prior to granting access. And there are a number of different things that are important. And these are things like the end user device the user is on, or their location, or some sort of situational context. This could be the location of a computer. This could be, have to do with frequency of access or time of day, volume of data, or what have you. And these kinds of scenarios enable you to, if you want to have a policy on that may govern certain kinds of super users or system admins, if their behavior changes all of a sudden they're downloading volumes, a lot more data than they used to, or they're accessing the system at a frequency or time or location that's different, then you can enact a policy which may prevent that data from being downloaded. That's one of the key capabilities that this solution provides. So why has SAP chosen to work with NextLabs? Well, NextLabs has a unique integration with SAP at the transaction, SAP systems at the transaction level. And this provides an authorization framework and policy-based security that is transparent to end users. So users who are interacting with the SAP system, they see all the normal functionality, any kinds of authorization or error messages, the system level messages or alerts, all show up in the same screen with the same kind of look and feel as if the policy system wasn't there. The solution provides, like Martin was saying, a combination of data and application security. And what we're seeing is that this solution helps organizations address relatively complex security requirements. And these, I think today we're seeing a lot of interest around, ITAR requirements, where depending on your location and other values, you may not be able to get access to certain kinds of data. We're seeing the same kind of interest amongst military organizations, where depending on where you are, you may have access to certain kinds of information about the location of armaments and so forth. So this is a very exciting time, and we're very pleased to be working with NextLabs. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Ken Lim, who's the CEO of NextLabs.
Okay, perfect. So I'll hand over a presentation right now to Ken. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Well, in today's environment, collaboration and information sharing is fundamental to how business is conducted every day. However, the challenge that companies are facing is how to balance between the need to share with the need to protect. With most global companies having a workforce spread out all over the world, and the need to be able to share information with external business partner, as well as doing business with a global supply chain networks, global supply chain partners, ultimately become critical on how do you secure the informations, both in the form of documents as well as allowing using the application to be able to collaborate. So you're talking about now data in both the application as well as data now in the form of unstructured data that often could be opened up and allow access to by a vast base of users, and the information and document or data could be potentially be everywhere. So at the same time, safeguarding information is also becoming a lot more difficult today, due to the fact that, as you see on this slide here, the environments are now a lot more complex. The user base are a lot more diverse. The application and the data are now not just sitting within your network. Many of them are now moving to the cloud and now no longer in your network, could be in the SaaS, for example. The data set are also exploding. The number of critical data that you use to conduct a business is expanding, right? You're talking about business document, technical data, critical intellectual properties, customer data. At the same time, the number of devices are also getting a lot more complex. You're talking about no longer just the managed computer anymore. You're now looking at BYOD company adopting tablet, for example. Workforces are now using phone, mobile phone, smartphone, for example, to be able to conduct businesses. So as a result of that, by the simple limited access model to share information is now no longer possible. You now need to be able to allow your user base to be able to share, access the information securely anywhere. At the same time, you now have another set of services available out there on the internet. The consumerization of IT and now the easy access to allow this web-based or cloud-based services to enable the workforce to be able to now collaborate and share information is also creating another challenges. So that is leading to the industry to realize that the network-centric approach is no longer sufficient. Trying to make the network, the wall thicker and taller is no longer sufficient. Information in silo, assuming everything inside a network is safe, meaning that if a user is now authenticated into your network, your critical, they are now allowed access to the critical business applications, and having locked up your business application behind a firewall is no longer sufficient. The problem here is because ultimately your data is naked. So that's led to why the data-centric approach is now at the center of most of the investment coming to security solutions. So fundamentally, the data-centric approach could be described in a very simple manner with this diagram on the slide. So there are 5 key aspects of that you need to look at or define a data-centric approach. First is you have to know your data. What data is critical and where the data are located. Is it in the application? Which application it is resided? It is stored in the form of documents and where it is stored. Who need access to those data? And whom do they need to be shared with? And how is the data being shared? Right. On top of that, those data could be you got to secure them when they're at rest, and the data could also be exposed in use, and most of the time those data is on the move as well. So that's what led us, or NextLab to invest heavily and focusing on developing what we call end-to-end solutions toward a data-centric security suite of products. At the core of that, back to what Martin was saying, at the core of this data-centric security is the dynamic authorization technology. So the dynamic authorization platform is key to be able to provide a policy-based approach to be able to first help company identify and automate identification of data, both inside the application as well as outside the applications. Often is referred to as being structured data versus unstructured data. And more importantly, how do you protect them? How do you protect them in different circumstances? Protect them at rest, protect them in use, protect them on the move. And then as those informations are being shared and used, for example, you got to have ability to be able to perform audit and report on the usage pattern, as well as be able to perform analytics and understand your risk, and be able to sometimes you have regulatory requirements or governance requirement that you need to be able to report on those activities. So this is leading us to this data-centric securities. At the core of that, the core concept of data-centric security is about having a set of security tools that will focusing on protecting the data directly, regardless where those data are resided. So you're now looking at tools such as data discovery tools, data classification technologies, dynamic authorization technology to be able to better secure the data inside the applications. DRM technology, rights management technology to be able to protect the unstructured data that is shared both inside the firewall and outside the firewall, and all this now be able to support it by some sort of centralized policy management and centralized reporting and and end-to-end visibility tool, for example. And that's the core set of solution that NextLab bring to the tables. So we provide at the central of it is a centralized policy management systems that is based on the Giacomo technologies, as well as ability to be able to capture all the information activity and all the information sharing activities to allow for a centralized audit and analysis. And then built on top of that is technology, dynamic authorization technology, and persistent data protection technology that would allow integration into various different applications, ERP, PLM, CRM, various different document management system, collaboration system, as well as cloud-based tools such as SaaS applications, and those are just the application itself, right? And not to mention you got a vast set of unstructured data sitting in different form of document format, such as business document in Office document, PDF. You got multimedia contents, for example, as well as engineering data, source code, for example. How do you handle all this data across this vast spectrums and the landscape, both spanning from critical business application to critical collaboration tools, your SaaS application, as well as all this unstructured data. The idea is you now can automate all this activity. There is now no longer silos across all these different applications. You can now have a single policy-based solutions that will allow you to be able to now automate different form of information control technique or procedures to help better secure the application as well as the data in the application, and more importantly, the data sitting outside the applications. So now you have a complete set of end-to-end data-centric security solution that can now cover across the entire information lifecycle. So next, I want to kind of just introduce quickly the NextLabs product suite. So at the core of it is what I mentioned earlier, a policy management system, which is the core dynamic authorization platform that is built based on the XACML technology with a attribute-based policy engine with the ability to be able to automate and understand data classification and users attributes such as from user, for example, using attribute from data to be able to now apply the right type of authorization to applications, which is the blue box that you see there. We have done the integration into a vast number of applications. First is the commercial off-the-shelf applications. And that's where our partnership with SAP come in. We have integrated our entitlement management solution set across the entire SAP stack, from the ERP application down to the HANA database, for example, as well as into the cloud applications such as Ariba, for example. And then we have also done integration with a cloud application as well, such as some SaaS applications or web-based application that you build on the Azure infrastructure or the AWS infrastructure, as well as your homegrown applications, which could be your .NET application, Java application, or web-based applications. So the idea is we can now offer a single solution that will allow you to be able to secure all applications. So on the right-hand side of the screen, on the red box there, is our solution that we built. We have built a technology, the rights management technology, often referred as EDR technology, to be able to secure data outside the application. And this is the unstructured data part of the equation I'm talking about. And all these, both of these in the set of solutions are based on a single centralized dynamic authorization platforms. Our rights management technology is able to be used from anywhere. You can use it on a mobile device as you consume the data on the mobile device, or you can use a browser to access the data that is secure and in a secure manner from anywhere, anywhere you want from any device. And we are also able to protect any kind of file type. One thing that's unique about the NextLabs EDM solution is we are file type agnostic. We have support for business document, rich media, as well as 2D, 3D, CAD, or any form of any format of that the data is stored in. And finally, we have offer a solution that will allow you to be able to use the technology both in the enterprise environment as well as in the cloud. So, so what you're looking at here is a single data-centric security solutions that can now secure both data in the application as well as data, unstructured data stored in, documents using a single centralized dynamic authorization platforms. So now let me switch gear a little bit into some customer use cases and on how some of the large customers or global organization as well as our U.S. government, for example, are adopting the data-centric security solutions. So I think many of you know and hear too much about the news with how some of the critical information or classified informations across some of the U.S. Federal government agencies being disclosed by unauthorized users. So now the governments are now putting together a directive and mandate to now better safeguard information sharing using ABAC technology. ABAC stands for Attribute-Based Access Control Technology, which is fundamentally dynamic authorization technology to be now able to safeguard the applications, as well as adopting encryption technology such as rights management technology to be able to secure the information at rest, as well as information in use and data on the move. Another example is a large financial service organizations, investment bank, for example, a big insurance company, for example, face a need to be able to protect non-public information and customer data from unauthorized access. And a lot of those data often is stored in the applications. And then those data would somehow, transform from the data in the application into documents, and those documents subsequently will now be shared or be, distributed to many people, both inside the company, outside the companies. So that's why, they realize it's critical to be able to apply the same, policy or same security policy to protect the data when it's in the applications, and be able to automatically apply the right security policy as those data is being taken off from those applications, or as the data are exported or transformed into unstructured data stored in the documents outside of the applications. And the third example is global chemical companies, where you're now looking at them trying to secure their secret formulas, recipe, and processes. And those are, business processes and critical information that actually store in the SAP ERP, for example. They want to be able to secure that, and allow, their global network of, workforce, as well as third-party vendors that include joint ventures, as well as company they acquire or company they divest, to be able to continue to use that, that the shared services, or continue to run the business on the ERP, for example, and still make sure that the data inside the ERP application is properly protected and not being wrongfully disclosed to the wrong user, for example. And then lastly is a global manufacturing companies where they are now looking at how to be able to protect product design and engineering data across a network of design partners, as well as manufacturing partner, where they often have to share critical prototypes with a manufacturing partners outside the companies. So they are now looking at how do you share those critical design data safely when those data are now leaving their network and now on the hand of their suppliers. The key now is how do you now secure those data when you fundamentally do not have control to those documents. So this way, rights management become very critical, where you can now ensure those information could either be expired across a period of time, and those critical design data can only be be viewed only, and not be further delegated or shared beyond the people who are supposed to be shared with. So let me do a time check here. I got a couple more slides to go here, but I can stop here if the time is up, Martin. The next two slides is really talk about some common practices that we've seen has been used and adopted successfully out there by many of our customers and by some of the largest corporations in the world.
Okay. Kang, thank you for your presentation and covering a broad range of topics. I will right now unmute also Chris, and we will move to the Q&A session. I will make me the presenter again. So to the attendees, please enter your questions using the GoToWebinar control panel. There's an area questions where you can enter your questions, and then we can pick all these questions and try our best to answer these questions. So maybe let's start with some initial questions we already have here. So one of these questions is, so is NextLabs an SAP partner? And so maybe also a little bit around what is the partner status you have here. So Chris or Kang, who wants to answer?
Oh, I can answer that.
Okay.
Yes, NextLabs is an SAP partner. SAP is reselling NextLabs product as SAP Dynamic Authorization Management by NextLabs. And there's more information available on sap.com if you want to go there.
Yeah. Another question I have here is around the technical integration. So during the presentation, Chris, I think you already mentioned that they integrated at transaction level. So maybe the two of you can go a little bit more into detail on how this integration looks like and maybe to which SAP components, etc.
Okay. Yeah, of course, Martin. So, and Kang, please feel free to jump in anytime. I think as you pointed out earlier in the presentation, the difference between RBAC and ABAC, one of the significant differences is how the policy-based authorization capability is integrated. Most applications don't expose the the authorization loop, the authority check, whatever it is. However, within SAP systems, there are an enormous number of interfaces, and NextLabs has integrated with a huge number of applications using bodies and user exits. And Kang, I don't know if you want to elaborate on that, but it's an ever-growing number of transactions, and that gives you fine-grained authorization, policy-based capability over all of the fields within those transactions, at least for the ones that are integrated.
Okay, so let me add a few more things to what Chris just said. What we have done is we have basically built the integration into SAP ABAP stack as well as a HANA stack, for example, as native applications. So you basically be looking at essentially the plugin code that would run inside, for example, SAP ERP, which could now be managed, just like another SAP module, for example. And because of that, the approach that we have taken, and because of the access that we have to some of the inner working of the platform, for example, we can now integrate into all the business processes, as well as understanding the business object model, as well as all the metadata. So as a result of that, it gives us vast access to all the attributes, right? Both the user attribute as well as all the data attributes, because we understand the context of what transaction is being performed by the users and what business object is being manipulated, as well as the metadata associating to them. So that gives us a wonderful mechanism to be able to lay over on top of the native SAP authorization and use and leveraging the functional role, for example. So that's why a lot of our customers are able to preserve their underlying authorization, which is mostly role-based, in the SAP systems, without making any changes to it, and then now lay over the dynamic authorization or the ABAC policy to augment and enhance the underlying role-based authorizations without making any changes. And that is critical because for many companies, they want to have the ABAC technology or dynamic authorization technology to work seamlessly and on top of their existing applications, because the ERPs are so critical, they can't afford to shut it down and have to re-engineer or migrate the authorization models. So having said that, our integration has been very instrumental to many large SAP customers, where they can now very quickly and seamlessly extend their authorization and elevate the security model in the ERP, or as well as different application that runs on HANA, for example, very quickly.
Okay, perfect. One last question I have here. What about the support for XACML or XACML?
Yeah, so NextLabs is actually a member of the XACML technical committee. For example, we have been involved and be part of the XACML standard and build the dynamic authorization platform on top of the XACML standard since the beginning of XACML. What we have done is we have extended and apply the XACML ABAC policy engine to solve some of the problem which is a little bit unconventional, and that is applying that to address the unstructured data, right? So that's why NextLabs is known to be the innovator, and we are really the first company that extend the dynamic authorization technology that is built on the XACML standard. Not just to be able to control authorization in the applications across both the homegrown application as well as commercial off-the-shelf applications such as SAP, PLM, and SharePoint, for example, but more importantly to the DRM technology to now be able to control access to unstructured data.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So then we are reaching the end of this webinar. Thank you to all attendees for listening to this KuppingerCole webinar. Thank you, Ken. Thank you, Chris, for your presentations. I hope to see every one of you at our upcoming European Identity Conference next year and see you in upcoming KuppingerCole webinars. Thank you for your time and hope to have you again soon in one of our webinars. Goodbye.